Well, I look about as good as I'm gonna look, so.
Yeah, I'm not getting better. All right, everyone, warm up those brains. It's time for the Get More Smarter podcast. This one here is episode 241. I'm Jason Bain.
I'm Ian Silveri. This week on the Get More Smarter podcast, it's no wonder there's a clown car of candidates in Colorado's 8th congressional district because the current incumbent is the biggest clown of them all. Then, that same clown famously promised it would be gangsters, not grandmas, that ICE was going to deport in Trump's mass deportation raids. Now that the exact opposite is true, Gabe has put his name on a mildly worded letter expressing some concerns. Then, that constitutional crisis we've been talking about? Well, it's exploded into full-blown fascism. Who could have guessed? And finally, we visit our 8th favorite member of Congress from Colorado who gleefully reminds us all that all this horrible shit is exactly what she voted for. But first, with a poll showing Gabe Evans is less popular than Donald Trump in his own district, and some interesting findings about public health, social media, and Medicaid, Healthier Colorado CEO Jake Williams is back on the pod to talk about the recent survey they just published. Take a listen. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, coming back to the show, a former podcaster himself, Jake Williams, the CEO of Healthier Colorado, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that works within policy and politics to improve the health of Coloradans. Jake, welcome back to the Get More Smarter podcast.
God, I'm so happy to be here, but you already messed up, Ian, because I have a current podcast. I'm not a retired podcaster.
What?
I'm not retired, but
is Wooden Teeth back?
Podcast, yeah. We post monthly. It's an awesome podcast. I hope to check it out. And I'm wondering, I am an avid listener, and I think that someone's been on at least 5 times or something. Whoever that person is, like, I'm in pursuit of that trophy. And I don't know if you hand out jackets like an SNL or some sort of memento. I'm making this my mission.
That would require us having a budget.
Yeah, what we can offer you is a podcast appearance. And that's circular logic. But I think, so we went back and looked at this. Alec Garnett and Alan Franklin are far and away the most frequent guests, but that's because they co-hosted the show while I was on parental leave. That was 5 years ago, which is crazy to think about. Christy Powell, Andrew Bauman, and Charles Ashby are sort of the 3 for you to pursue records-wise. So this is your second appearance on the show, I think. Charles has done 5. So you've got to come back 3 more times.
I think John Hickenlooper's around that number 2.
Yeah, he's been on 4 or 5 times as well, and including his surprise appearance during the James Coleman episode, of course.
That's right.
Hard to forget that.
All right, they're on notice. I'm coming for you.
All right, well,
we'll let them know.
Jason, you want to?
Yeah. Let's start by having you remind our listeners about Healthier Colorado and your mission and how it ended up with you commissioning this poll we're going to talk about.
Healthier Colorado seeks to improve public health primarily through the public policy process. So we do politics and policy in a nonpartisan way to improve public health. Medicaid is a fundamental program to supporting public health, as is SNAP, formerly known as food stamps. And those are 2 huge items on the table that are set to be cut by H.R. 1, aka the big, beautiful bill, the budget bill being debated in Congress right now. And so we commissioned a poll to see where voters were at on those cuts. And to preview what we found, they don't like what they heard about what's being done.
And we'll get into all that in a minute. I wanted to ask one technical question. This is a poll that was a statewide survey, but it did contain an oversample in our 8th congressional district, home of our 7th favorite member of Congress, Gabe Evans. Why did you decide to oversample CD8 specifically?
CD8, Gabe Evans, key swing vote. It's gratifying to be in a position, frankly, here in Colorado with such a tight margin in the House of Representatives. Flipping 1, 2, 3 votes could be consequential to the fate of this bill. Gabe Evans, CD8, a key swing vote because, he won just by a handful of votes a couple of years ago. It should be probably a tight and certainly competitive election this next election. And a huge amount of constituents in CD8 depend on these programs. So all sorts of reasons add up to our rationale for doing a CD8 oversample.
Right. It's the second highest Medicaid enrollment rate in the state and the first highest among kids.
That's right.
Yep. Well, your polling shows overwhelming opposition to Medicaid cuts. 65% of people statewide and 63% in the 8th congressional district say they are less likely to vote for a candidate who supports these cuts. This mirrors a national Quinnipiac University poll released around the same time showing national support levels for Medicaid, with 47% of people in that poll saying Medicaid funding should actually increase. So were you surprised at all with the intensity of the response?
No, we've pulled it before, and we've seen that people support Medicaid. I think it's obvious that people see their neighbors, their families, themselves benefiting from this program. I mean, 1 in 5 Coloradans are on it. In CD8, 1 in 3 Coloradans are on it. 40% of the state's kids are on it. 40% of the state's births are supported by it. So it's all around. So you can't really pull the wool over anybody's eyes here. And what's shocking to me is that the pitch from those who support this bill to cut the program is, hey, we're going to cut the program to make it better, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's like, hey, here's this thing that makes your life better. How about we do a little bit less of it and somehow it's going to benefit you? It does not add up, and voters see that. In fact, we asked directly, do you think that the changes that are being proposed are more about making the program better or about diverting money from the program for other purposes? And majorities, both statewide and in CD8, said this is about diverting money for other purposes. The number was 51% in CD8, 60% statewide. So the pitch isn't working, and it shouldn't be a surprise.
So you mentioned that President Trump's proposal to raise taxes on individuals making over $2.5 million to help fund Medicaid in the release that you guys sent out accompanying this poll. First of all, that's the first time I've heard of that. Is that currently in the bill, or is this another one of like Donald Trump's magic hand-waving tricks he uses to sell the thing, but just never makes it in at the end of the process?
Well, I don't know about the sincerity of his intentions, but he did propose this, and I think Bannon backed it as well. This is earlier this year. It did not make it into the bill. The reason why we included this question in the poll is for a couple of reasons. One, and I'm sincere when I say that I don't think all the best budget or all the best healthcare ideas come from one party necessarily.
Sure.
And
I do, but I understand why you would say that.
And then second, we still have a window here. This is now in the Senate's hands, and we'll see what happens. And there's a lot of concern, both among Democrats and Republicans, about the giant increase that will occur in the national debt as a result of this bill if it passes. And so there are options here, politically popular options, to help pay for this bill. The suggestion by President Trump to raise taxes on individuals who make more than $2.5 million a year is very popular. 3 out of 4 voters in this poll support that proposal. And you're right, not in there now, but there's nothing holding back the Senate, for example, to put it or something like it in the bill.
So I just want to put a finer point on what you just said, which is that raising taxes on the richest people to pay for popular programs with a big footprint is a very popular idea.
Yes.
That's good to know.
And not doing that is very well going to get you booted out of Congress if these
According
polls
to
are correct.
Poll, I mean, people are less likely to vote for any candidate who votes to cut Medicaid, and that's already happened in the case of CD8, and other congressional districts in this state.
Right. All 4 Republicans voted for this big bullshit bill, which cuts Medicaid by hundreds of millions of dollars. There's no way around it now.
That's right.
The poll shows similar opposition to SNAP cuts, which, as you mentioned earlier, that's food stamps. Only 19% of people statewide support decreases. When we talk about people who use SNAP, who are we talking about?
These are low-income people who are food insecure, and it's very real. I serve on the board of another organization who supports child victims of sexual abuse. And just 2 days ago, I was in a board meeting, and they were talking about their need to kind of establish a localized food bank for when they bring families in for these interviews, because sometimes they have to skip these interviews about this horrific thing that happened to their kid because they're food insecure or the kid's too hungry to do the interview. This is in the United States of America.
In the richest country in the history of the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a very real problem. And again, I think voters are wise. They see the fundamental importance of this program. And at the same time, I was a little bit surprised at the level of support here. For SNAP, we're talking about 83% of voters statewide, 81% of voters in CD8 support the program. 3/4 of voters statewide say they want to keep the funding the same or increase it. 66% in CD8 want to keep it the same or increase it. It's a really overwhelming support for this program. And again, this is something that's set to be significantly cut by this so-called big, beautiful bill.
So I don't know if you have the crosstabs in front of you, but I'd love to ask you about who makes up the 19% in your survey that say they actually want to cut SNAP. Are they overwhelmingly primary voting Republicans, maybe evangelical Christians?
Oh, I don't know about evangelical Christians, but I will say with a number like 83% statewide, 81% in CD8, actually you're getting majority of Republican support on this. And there is a trend, and this probably is surprising, the higher up the income scale you go and the higher up the education scale you go, there's a drop-off in support for the program. So lower income people tend to support it a little more. But honestly, the bigger story here, you can't get 83% on anything.
On anything, right? Yeah,
you get 83% on the Broncos. You can't get like that's.
Well, they don't deserve 83%. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
Well, so one more question on this part of the survey: 77% of Colorado voters actually want Medicaid funding to increase or stay the same, according to your survey. As you know, there's a specter of potential special legislative session to try and puzzle through how Colorado can maybe backfill or otherwise blunt the impact of these draconian cuts, assuming that the federal government actually does this. What options are on the table? I mean, Colorado has just cut taxes over and over again over the last few years, from the income tax to the property taxes, over and over again. Revenue's going down. The legislature just cut $1 billion out of the budget, in my opinion, for no good fucking reason in the last session because of Tabor. What could we do if the federal government starts to pull millions and millions of dollars away, billions, I suppose, of dollars away from Medicaid in Colorado?
I think you've officially reached the bone in these cuts that we made in the state legislature during the regular session of this year. We could find some more money, but we're talking certainly not enough to replace what's proposed being cut here. Going forward, if we want to maintain the same level of coverage that we've enjoyed before, I think we have to start thinking about, new revenue of some sort, or at least some removal of caps of some sort within our complicated constitutional structure.
I just want to revisit that point we agreed on a minute ago about how raising taxes on really rich people to fund popular programs is broad support in Colorado and elsewhere. Just throwing that out.
Yeah.
Have you, I don't know if this is in the poll, but have you started looking at the fact that how much rates for people who are not on Medicaid are going to rise if these cuts happen?
Yeah, that's the thing that I hope people understand. Even if you are not on Medicaid, you're going to pay. Right. How this works is if people lose Medicaid coverage, that means more uninsured people who are unable to pay their medical bills showing up at clinics and hospitals. Clinics and hospitals then, by necessity, have to pass that cost onto the people who can pay. So even if you're not on Medicaid, you have a stake in this. You will pay more as a result of this bill. And then, not to get too weedsy, but also the people in the expansion population and people who buy on the marketplace are at risk of losing their coverage as well, depending on how this shakes out and is implemented. We can say for sure that over 123,000 people on Medicaid will lose their coverage, but also up to 377,000 people in Colorado are at risk of losing their coverage as a ripple effect of these cuts.
Wow. I want to move to a different section of the poll real quick, because you guys pushed a bill last session, or you're part of a coalition supporting a bill last session that would have regulated social media companies a lot more strongly, which Governor Polis, in my view, unfortunately and mysteriously vetoed. 90% of voters in your poll believe social media negatively impacts youth mental health, with 58% saying very negative, which is up from 49% in December. As we've talked about on this show, Governor Polis vetoed the social media bill that had wide bipartisan support. In fact, it had enough support to override the veto in the Senate, not enough to do the same thing in the House, unfortunately. What was in that bill, and why do you think he ultimately vetoed it despite its obvious broad popularity and bipartisan nature?
Well, first off, I was a little bit surprised about the results that we got here. We asked both about people's view on whether or not there's a youth mental health crisis, and we asked them about the effect of social media, as you referenced, on youth mental health. And we've asked these questions before, as you mentioned, and the intensity has increased. So in case you're thinking that the youth mental health crisis was an artifact of COVID, for example, it isn't. And this data aligns with other data to indicate that that's really the case. The bill that the governor vetoed had protections for kids against, frankly, criminal activity that occurs online and more. It's a long bill. I won't go through all of it. But I think that I don't want to speak for the governor, but my understanding of where he's coming from here is that he thinks that the internet should be as open as free as possible, and that it's the job of parents, he said before, the job of parents to govern, if you will, their children, to protect them from those sort of harms online. Speaking as a parent myself of teenagers, it's not so easy.
Right.
No.
Speaking as the parent of a 5-year-old, it's not so easy. I mean, like, he has
I've got
very
3
little
teenagers myself, yeah.
very little device time, but like sometimes I will like peek over his shoulder and be like, what the fuck YouTube slop is this? Like, what are you watching?
Yeah, I mean, speaking for our own family, we do pay attention, and we're very fortunate, resources to throw at this. But it's impossible to compete against effectively multi-billion-dollar corporations whose objective is to capture the attention of your kid. I cannot compete as a father. This is a systemic issue that requires a systemic response. Fortunately, here in Colorado, to toot our own horn for a second, 2 sessions ago, we passed new law that will come online January 1st, 2026. And in a nutshell, what it does for youth users of these platforms, every so often, there will be what we call a friction message that will pop up on the platform and say, hey, you've been on this for, 30 minutes, and there are negative effects of being on social media too long. Here are some resources to consider to think about how you use the internet. And then it becomes more frequent during nighttime or bedtime hours, because studies show that the effect on sleep when it comes to youth use of social media is profound. It has effects both on physical health and mental health. So that's going to come online. It'd be the first one in the country on January 1st, 2026. And we retested support for that law, and it's strong. So that's a good first step. I think more has to be done. I don't know if the bill that was vetoed this past session will come back. We'll see. But if it doesn't get taken care of this session, I think this is an important issue for whoever our next governor is, because this problem is not going away.
Let's go back to the poll for a second and talk a little bit more about the politics. You've done some favorability ratings, and you did these back in December, and you did these again. I was under the impression that your December survey, despite having a little bit to do with it, was just a primary voting survey, but after rereading it again, you actually did do a general election survey and then a smaller primary electorate survey in December, correct? So these are apples to apples is what I'm asking you. These are both like general election Colorado surveys, the one you did in December and the one you just released?
Yeah, the one we did in December, we did both a general and a primary. The one that we did this time that we've released so far is on the general.
All right. Well, keep your eyes peeled for maybe some more coming from Healthier Colorado. Maybe a teaser there.
Yeah, but by the time this posts, there will be data posted on our website that has a poll of likely 2026 Democratic primary voters on many of these same issues.
And that website is
healthiercolorado.org. And if you go to the Our Work tab at the top, you find it all there.
Did you test all 12 Democratic candidates by any chance?
You'll see what we post.
All right, there we go. Go to healthiercolorado.org and check out that Our Work tab. All right, but I want to talk about the favorability of some of the leaders that you tested in the poll. Donald Trump in December was 43 favorable, 56 unfavorable. That's a net minus 13. Trump now is 37% favorable, 62% unfavorable. That's a net minus 25. The slide from December till now is 12 points to the negative. RFK, in December, you tested him, and we talked about this, 43 to 47, net minus 4. Okay, well, Colorado's a little weird. We got some hippies who kind of agree with the anti-vaccine stuff, unfortunately. We got some right-wingers on there, too. But now, his favorables are 40 to 57. That's a net 17 negative rating and a slide of 13 points in the wrong direction. The one I want to just hang on for a second, because holy shit, Elon Musk back in December, 44% favorable, 51% unfavorable. That was -7 back then. Now, I've never seen numbers like this. He's 36 favorable, 63 unfavorable. That's a net -27, a slide of 20 points in 6 months. Jason?
Yeah.
Bad for Elon. Also bad for Tesla owners.
Yeah.
Are you one of them?
And I have to explain myself at random points during my traveling day because people literally say things to me.
You haven't gotten one of those stickers that say, like, I bought this before Elon was a Nazi?
I haven't gotten around to it. I might have to resort to it.
Sketch you one. Yeah.
Do you have a sense on this data if people are viewing Trump, RFK, Musk as a group, like that they're all going to rise or sink together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you saw that in the December poll. There's some more divergence in this poll, but generally speaking, if you look in the crosstabs, you'll see some evidence that they generally rise and fall as a group. But as Ian pointed out, there is some divergence here among them all. Because like Ian said, RFK Jr. is a special case. He's part of a Republican administration, but he wasn't always a Republican, and he has some appeal that extends both left and right. And then, Elon kind of has developed his own profile closely associated with Trump, but is also kind of a figure on his own.
Governor Polis has a 47-47 rating. He's essentially tied favorable, unfavorable, which is the first time I can recall seeing him without a pretty healthy net positive rating. Just 6 months ago, he was at 52% favorable, 47% unfavorable in your ratings. What do you make of the shift? Why is he losing popularity?
Well, I would have to go into Speculationville for that, but here we go.
That's where we live, is Speculationville.
Yeah, here we are.
Well, first remember that, when we were in COVID, all governors really got a bump. And the further away we get from that, I think the more perilous, if you will, for governors. And then beyond that, I don't know how much some of these high-profile vetoes get through and if they have an effect, but perhaps they do. Again, it's Speculationville.
Sure.
It could also be a reflection of people's perception of the economy and how things are going, and incumbents get punished. But I do not have a definitive answer for you on that one.
It may be too that he's getting into his final year as governor, and people just get tired of whoever's around sometimes.
Yeah. Could be.
Last point on the folks you tested here. Gabe Evans, our 7th favorite member of Congress from Colorado, is frankly doing a little bit better than we thought, considering all of his recent objectively bad moves and bad news. He's got a 40% favorable rating among voters in his district and a 42% unfavorable rating, putting him net -2. But Trump, despite a -10 net negative rating, has a higher favorable rating in the district than Evans. 45% of CD8 voters rate Trump favorably compared to 42% for Evans. Do you have any insights as to what's driving that delta?
Well, first of all, I mean, Trump has a more defined brand, if you will,
Sure.
than a member of Congress would. I mean, second, there's a comms difference. So, Trump is everywhere all the time as Donald Trump. And at this point in the cycle, people don't hear from Gabe Evans, obviously, in the same way. And those who are going to oppose him really aren't up on TV, digital, etc., with all their negative messages to bring him down. So honestly, I don't put too much stock yet into these ratings. What I do put stock in are the votes that he's taking now that are not going to go away, because that these are going to come back and be blown up. Voters right now, while they clearly support Medicaid, they're not following the intricacies of who voted what on when. But when they have digital and field and TV blaring in their face about what happened here, I think these numbers are going.
And when they start to see their friends and family and relatives losing health care coverage, and when their prices go up, I mean, all this stuff is baked. This is predictable. We know what's going to happen.
Well,
they're going to look around the world. Yeah.
How do you go up if you're him at this point? What do you do to improve it?
So you're asking me to play the role of Gabe Evans, campaign manager.
We've been trying to figure it out.
Honestly, I will. Let's compare him to the member of Congress that you affectionately refer to as the bread sandwich, Jeff Hurd. I want to give Jeff Hurd credit, even though he cast a vote that was the same as Gabe Evans here. I can tell you that behind the scenes, if you will, we've worked with his office. He is actually listening to people in his district. He's put his name on public communication to House Republican leadership to avoid some of the cuts that we asked him to avoid. It's been a different story with Gabe Evans. And so if you put these two next to each other, I think you have one Republican member of Congress that I interpret to sincerely be trying to listen to people in his district and is sincerely trying to win this next election. And I just can't explain the actions of Representative Evans, given everything we've talked about, given the high level of constituents in his district who depend on Medicaid and SNAP. And it's one thing to vote against this bill, but also to have a press conference with Warren over on the steps of the Capitol and brag about it. It just doesn't make any political sense. And this isn't even a partisan thing, man. Like, do you think that Medicaid is important for your local community? And in CD8, half of Republicans said, yes, this is an important program in our local community. 3/4 of unaffiliated said, yes, in CD8, this is an important program in our community. And so given that, and it's not like Representative Evans hasn't seen previous polling on this until Healthier
He's just
Colorado.
doing it anyway.
And he's doing it anyway. And you don't have to be political geniuses like Jason Bain and Ian Silveri to know that this is really bad politics. And you don't have to be the Surgeon General to know that this is bad policy.
I don't know if the Surgeon General would know that at this point.
Current Surgeon General running a pro-smoking campaign.
Let me ask you about vaccines. 72% of Coloradans in your poll say vaccines are safe. 76% believe they're effective. How do we prevent those numbers from sliding with RFK Jr. and eliminating the people that are on the vaccine advisory board and just telling people to rub dirt on it? It'll go away.
Well, part of this is the effect of the increasing number of Americans who consume health and wellness information online. So it's doubled proportionally in the last 4 years.
And when you say consume health and wellness information online, you mean being like annihilated by disinformation on a very regular basis, right?
Much of it, yes. And there's some good stuff out there too, but it's tough for an individual to, sort out the good from the bad. Fortunately, a huge majority of folks here in Colorado correctly view vaccines as generally safe and effective. And at the same time, I can tell you that, we've been polling this issue in different ways for many years now, and there has been an erosion. And the erosion comes from the communication like you've been seeing out of RFK Jr. and his allies. And the best we can do at this point is to try to counter the mis and disinformation. But I am heartened to see that we still have a supermajority plus here of people who correctly view vaccines as safe and completely reject the notion that we ask straight up, do you think that vaccines cause autism? And only 18% of people, which is still too high, but 18%.
Yeah, that's 1 out of 5, man. That's still deeply concerning because it is not true.
But that's
anywhere.
about what you'll get if you ask people if they believe in Bigfoot. I mean, you'll get that kind of number too.
You're probably right.
Yeah, fair enough. Any other insights or observations or findings in the poll that you thought were interesting that we should talk about before we let you go?
I think we covered it all.
That's great. That's awesome. We did it.
I think a good future question would be your approval rating.
Oh, the Get More Smarter podcast? You want to know something?
Mine's 4.
So I don't remember if this was Brittany's state Senate race or if it was her first congressional race, but our pollster put an Ian Silveri question in there. They were like, we got to make sure this guy's not a fucking liability. And they tested me and I had fucking surprisingly high name ID, but I was net even.
Wow.
Hey.
Yeah. And there was a question that was like, if you knew a candidate was married to one of the most controversial left-wing provocateur activist, they threw the sink at me. They were like, does this concern you? And voters were like, no, not really.
I got to be honest, and you can cut all this, but
no, definitely not.
But when now Congresswoman Pedersen went down this road, I'm like, are they going to put a leash on Ian now?
You mean a different leash?
As far as I can tell,
I've leashed myself. So I made adjustments. I stopped writing for the Denver Post. That was a deal that I had with the editor.
Yeah.
It was like, if Brittany ends up, in a bigger office, you're going to have to not write here anymore, which I think is totally fair. I stopped posting under my own name on all social media. So I'm not Ian Silveri on any platform. I still help with the pod. I do this once a week. Plenty of people listen to it. And my theory is that there's just too much to sift through at this point, so that it's not worth it. So that
and you blame the bad stuff on me. So
you're flooding the zone. You're flooding the zone like Trump. Like which there's just too much. You can't pick one thing.
Jake, this is episode number 241. That means there's at least 241 hours of audio that one would have to sift through at this point to try and find the nuggets. I think it's just too much. Plus, considering the source material, it's just very hard to listen to me talk for that long.
Hey, I honestly listen nearly every week to you guys. I love it. Keep it up.
That's very nice. Well, Jake Williams, CEO of Healthier Colorado, thank you so much first of all, for commissioning this poll. It's just great to have the information out there. We really appreciate you guys investing in making sure that people know what's going on, trying to persuade people like Gabe Evans and the Bread Sandwich to do the right thing, and for coming back on the Get More Smarter podcast. It is always great to see you, my friend.
Awesome to be here. This is my second step on the road to supremacy in the frequency of Get More Smarter appearances.
We're going to need a trophy.
And
Absolutely.
if you ever have need for two guys who don't know what the fuck we're talking about to come on Wooden Teeth, I think both of us would love to.
Anytime.
All right. Stay tuned.
We're going to stay with Gabe Evans to start, who I imagine will look back fondly on the first 4 months of 2025 as that time when people took him seriously.
Yeah.
That's over. Gabe became a punchline in the last 2 weeks. I think he pretty much jumped the shark. We've been chronicling how he went from state representative to right-wing candidate for Congress in the 8th Congressional District to a full-on MAGA warrior in Washington, D.C. And from media reports and things we've been hearing, it seems like Evans in the month of June just became a walking punchline.
All the reporters I talk to, all the people I talk to in Washington basically have the same question, which is why? Why hasn't he let one photon of daylight come between him and Donald Trump since he was elected? He is all in a way that Jeff Hurd is not all in, maybe in a way that Jeff Crank is all in, but Crank is in an R+20 district.
Gabe's all in a way that I don't know that I've seen in a while. He's doing stuff he doesn't need to do.
Right. He's overselling the shit that is going to hurt him in the general election in 2026.
We've talked about how he's all in on Medicaid cuts in the big, beautiful bullshit bill, which is not a surprise, but we've both been kind of shocked that he just keeps talking about it at every opportunity. He made a fool of himself then recently by asking publicly Colorado senators to remove a clean energy subsidies elimination from the bill that he supported, but apparently didn't bother to read.
One of those, oops, I guess this is going to affect my district. Can you guys fix my mistake here, please? And
please
thank you very much. While he was doing press conferences, lauding this great bill, he's begging senators to take out provisions that would hurt people in his district. Great job.
I know it was 1,100 pages long, but maybe skim it. I don't know before you read it.
This was also not unknown. I mean, there were plenty of Republican members of Congress, frankly, plenty of Republican members of Congress who said, I feel like maybe it's Schweikert in Arizona, somebody in Arizona who was like, oh my God, this is going to destroy this battery plant that they're building in my district. I guess I'll vote yes anyway.
Right. Oh, well.
They knew this was in it. This wasn't a surprise after the fact.
Right. But Evans may have cemented his new reputation with what he did following the anti-Semitic attacks in Boulder. And even among Republicans, check out this comment from a recent news conference with Republican leadership before we move on. Caitlin Kim of Colorado Public Radio reports that, quote, Gabe Evans is at House Leadership Presser today. Majority Leader Steve Scalise had Evans stand next to Speaker Mike Johnson and quipped, it's take your Gabe to work day, unquote.
And in this funny joke, Gabe is a child. He's a small child. And they've taken him to the big boy table for the day. That's nice.
Yeah, that's not, I mean, maybe it's one of those inside jokes that is funny to them, but it just does not look good for him.
No, it's not a great look.
So his decision to introduce a resolution related to the anti-Semitic attacks in Boulder has moved him into Lauren Boebert level territory among his peers. We mentioned this a little bit last episode, but rather than sign on to a bipartisan resolution condemning the violence in Boulder, which all Colorado members of the delegation signed,
and which was rightfully brought by friend of the pod, Joe Neguse, because this happened in his district. That is how this is supposed to work. If something horrible happens in your community, you get to lead on this, and it is pretty fucked up for you to take the opportunity to try and score some political points on your own issues and take focus away from the victims and the survivors of the attack and instead put the spotlight on you, Gabe Evans.
Right. And Evans wanted to make a point of grandstanding on calling Colorado a sanctuary state, praising President Trump's aggressive action on immigration enforcement. This is a guy, remember, who starts most of his public statements with the phrase, "as a former police officer."
Right.
And he also tells any reporter who will listen that he wears his police boots in Congress. But instead, he used his resolution to spread falsehoods that have already been debunked, that Colorado authorities did not work with federal immigration officials about the Egyptian national who attacked this Jewish group of, I don't want to call them protesters.
Demonstrators.
Demonstrators is better. Yeah. Turns out the Colorado Bureau of Investigation did alert ICE after the guy tried and failed to buy a gun in Colorado. The Evans resolution ended up being watered down under pressure from House Republicans, but the text was still littered with errors, misquoted the number of victims, said one of the victims was reportedly a Holocaust survivor. She is a Holocaust survivor. There's no mystery to that. And as you mentioned, it's atypical of a member of Congress to sponsor a resolution like this when it's not even in his or her district. Here's Congressman Joe Neguse appropriately furious during a floor debate on Monday.
That's not a surprise. It's why it's important for members who represent communities that are besieged by tragedies like this one to have the opportunity to introduce a resolution and have that resolution considered on the floor. Let me give you some examples, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Evans' resolution claims that there were 14 victims of this attack. He is wrong. There are 15 victims. Maybe he got that from Google or found it in a newspaper article. But had he been involved in the conversations with law enforcement, as I have, he would know that there were 15 victims of this terrible attack. It's poor decorum to ask this body to vote on a resolution that lists the wrong number of victims. They are my constituents. They are real people who were burned half to death by a terrorist 7 days ago. The least you can do is list the right number. The resolution also says, Mr. Evans, and I quote, that reportedly, one victim was a Holocaust survivor. She's not reportedly a survivor. She is a Holocaust survivor. There's no doubt to that. There's no allegation to that. I know because she's my constituent. The word reportedly should be struck from this resolution. My colleague's resolution, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Evans' resolution, I want to be clear, because we're considering multiple resolutions today, so I'm talking about the resolution from Mr. Gabe Evans of Colorado, does not mention once, not once, the Boulder Police Department, the officers that I represent who put their lives on the line to save members of the community 7 days ago. The resolution that Mr. Evans has offered doesn't mention the FBI once, not once, whose swift response was so integral. The only law enforcement agency that Mr. Evans mentions is ICE, the one agency that was not in Boulder that day.
So this is the thing. Like, Joe represents these people. He knows these people. He's met with these folks. He's met with their families. He understands what they just went through. He's the right person to be putting this forward. Gabe Evans is using this as an opportunistic political football to try and score points, try and make points about immigration policy, which are basically irrelevant to this fucking conversation. This is about permission structures for violence against Jewish people, right?
Right.
And good for Joe for standing up and saying, we're not going to let you play political football with this incident that happened in our community. Good for him.
This angered others who were not even from Colorado. Listen to this exchange between Democrat Dan Goldman of New York and Evans, which is really cringy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the gentleman from Colorado would indulge a quick question before he leaves. Yesterday, there was a rally with thousands of people in Boulder, Colorado, commemorating the victims, celebrating Jewish culture and people. The two senators from Colorado were there. Mr. Neguse was there. I would just ask if the gentleman who's introducing this resolution to commemorate ostensibly the victims of Boulder was in his neighboring district to be with the victims and the community.
The gentleman's recognized, from Colorado is recognized, who would like to respond to the question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question. I unfortunately had other engagements that had been scheduled.
This guy sucks ass.
So guess where Evans was on that Sunday instead of joining the victims in Boulder?
Doing constituent services in his own district in Colorado.
Not quite. He was at the Swank Four Seasons Resort in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. for a fundraising salon with House Speaker Mike Johnson.
Not to be confused for the Four Seasons in Georgetown, Colorado.
Right. Which I don't think exists. But
Nope, sorry, no, they don't have one yet.
That's when he says, I had a previously scheduled. That's something you skip.
Yeah.
In this case. And you know you done fucked up when the House Minority Leader can't even parse his words anymore. Here's Hakeem Jeffries during a press availability the same day that the Evans resolution was debated.
Two resolutions condemning the Boulder attack are coming to the floor this week. One of them from Congressman Gabe Evans includes language labeling Free Palestine an anti-Semitic slogan and also praising ICE for quote-unquote protecting the homeland. I know that some of your progressive members are very unhappy with some of that language. I'm wondering, A, how you plan to vote on that personally, and B, how you're advising members to vote on it.
It's not simply a subset of members of the House Democratic Caucus who oppose the so-called Evans resolution. Who is this guy? He's not seriously concerned with combating anti-Semitism in America. This is not a serious effort. This guy's going to be a one-term member of Congress. He's a complete and total embarrassment. He's not even pretending to be moderate at this point. He's all in on ripping away health care from the American people. And this is a desperate attempt to distract. Why do we know that's the case? Because every major Jewish organization, including AJC, has come out in opposition to the so-called Evans resolution. Every major Jewish organization, as far as I can tell. These are organizations that are at the forefront of combating anti-Semitism in America. That resolution is an embarrassment. It's not serious. It's a joke. And Gabe Evans is a joke.
Hell yeah. This dude's having a bad week. And he brought it on himself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I can't emphasize enough how rare that is. That never happens.
No, especially not to some backbencher freshman that nobody ever heard of who decided to try and wave his arms and say, look at me during a tragedy like this, trying to score points on the back of the victims in Boulder for your bullshit anti-immigration agenda, which now, of course, the Trump administration has put federal troops into American cities to try and enforce. Yep. Looks like Gabe Evans is having some second thoughts about this whole mass deportation thing, isn't he?
Yeah, I guess when it rains shit, it pours shit, and that's where Evans is. He's now trying to figure out a way to backtrack on his repeated comments that increased immigration enforcement targets, quote, gangsters, not grandmas, unquote.
Because it is increasingly clear that the opposite is true.
Right.
They are rounding up innocent people, including American citizens, and putting them into immigration enforcement actions, deportations, gulags, you fucking name it. The number of quote unquote violent criminals that they've been able to catch during this operation is what, a rounding error in the overall scheme of things?
Yeah, but he has said this phrase, gangsters, not grandmas, for months. In May, he told the Colorado Springs Gazette newspaper that, quote, we have not yet identified one case in Colorado where somebody was deported in a manner that brought concern, unquote. Not true. As you mentioned, the Trump administration is deporting any immigrant it can find. I mean, hell, if you locate another country on a globe, you could be in the crosshairs just for acknowledging that there are other countries. So Evans recently signed on to a letter with 5 other House Republicans, essentially asking Immigrations and Customs Enforcement to explain how many people being deported actually have criminal records. The letter also asks ICE to prioritize deporting criminals as opposed to grandmas. This might have done Evans some good if he had not, as we mentioned, spent the last several months saying that only criminals were being deported.
Yeah. Yeah. He gave permission to this whole fucking thing. Every single one of these deportations, these acts of violence committed on American citizens, on visitors to our country, on people who are undocumented by ICE, by the military, by police, the responsibility rests with Evans.
Yeah.
This is on his shoulders. He did this.
It's biting him in the ass again. All right, it's time to ask if we have reached the fascism stage of 2025. It kind of feels like it.
Yeah, impossible to argue against it at this point. So I'll go ahead and agree with you there.
Here's MSNBC on the latest.
A Rubicon crossing moment for the United States of America. A sitting senator, California Democratic Senator Alex Padilla, was treated in a manner you don't see every day in the United States of America or in any democracy for that matter. Today, he was forcibly removed from a press conference that was being held by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. The sitting senator was then handcuffed and his body was placed on the ground. The video released by Senator Padilla's office shows what I just described.
Straight and balancing. Sir, hands up. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the secretary because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your
I also want to
hands off.
Good God.
On the ground. Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
If you don't my hands, go ahead, put me behind my back.
All right, cool. One hand, lay flat, lay flat.
Other hand, sir. Other hand.
They're handcuffing him. All he did was say, hey, I've got questions.
There's no recording allowed out here. I did not know. There's no recording allowed out here.
There's a disinformation campaign underway on Fox News where Kristi Noem did an interview in the 3 o'clock hour and said he didn't identify himself. I'm going to ask the control room to rewind that and play it again. While they're doing that, let me just state this. He said, oh, here it is. Watch for yourself.
Sir, hands up. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions.
There's no recording allowed in here. I wonder why. Again, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, went on Fox News at 3 p.m. and told this lie, quote, he didn't ID himself. Padilla did, so there's that. But he also tried to say before he was manhandled that he was there with questions for the secretary at her press conference. Here's how he described it after a few moments ago.
Since the beginning of the year, but especially over the course of recent weeks, several of my colleagues have been asking the Department of Homeland Security for more information and more answers on their increasingly extreme immigration enforcement actions. And we've gotten little to no information in response to our inquiries. And so I came to the press conference to hear what she had to say, to see if I could learn any new additional information. And at one point, I had a question. And let me emphasize, just as we've emphasized the right for people to peacefully protest and to stand up for their First Amendment rights, for our fundamental rights. I was there peacefully. At one point, I had a question. And so I began to ask a question. I was almost immediately forcibly removed from the room. I was forced to the ground, and I was handcuffed. I will say this. If this is how this administration responds to a senator with a question, if this is how the Department of Homeland Security responds to a senator with a question, you can only imagine what they're doing to farm workers, to cooks, to day laborers out in the Los Angeles community and throughout California and throughout the country.
You can see there that for listeners who don't see the video, he's clearly losing his composure a little bit there and starting to tear up. Like this is a very personal moment to him.
Yeah, what the anchor on MSNBC said, I think is true. This is a Rubicon crossing moment, like we've had 1 a week, 2 a week since these fucking lunatics
this feels
got
different,
sworn
though.
back into office. I hope so. I hope that seeing a member of the minority party in the legislative branch, a co-equal branch of government to the executive, by the fucking way, manhandled, thrown to the ground, and handcuffed for asking a question after identifying himself as a U.S. senator. You think these federal agents don't know who the fucking U.S. senator from California is? I mean, they should. If they don't, we got other problems.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've heard Republicans say, well, how are they supposed to know who he was? I mean, he's not a big face or name like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders.
The Capitol police officers know who I am.
Right.
It's their job. They should know who 100 people who are their bosses, who appropriate their funding, they should know. It's not a fucking excuse. And even still, you don't treat anybody like that. What if he was a reporter?
Right.
He's just, I got a question. I'm going to ask you a question. He identifies himself as a U.S. senator, thrown to the ground, handcuffed. Like, it's the third member of Congress, or the third Democratic elected official, I should say. Newark Mayor Ras Baraka, LaMonica McIver from New Jersey, and now this guy?
Yeah.
Senator Alex Padilla of California, that this administration has violently detained, handcuffed, arrested, and in LaMonica McIver's case, indicted?
Right. Well, many members of Colorado's congressional delegation responded forcefully. Congressman Jason Crow made the same argument as Padilla, saying, when a senator gets thrown to the ground, how will they treat you and your family? Crow says, quote, this type of stuff happens in dictatorships, not democracies. Donald Trump wants total control, but we will not be intimidated, unquote. Representative Joe Neguse called on Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to resign. Senator Michael Bennet demanded an investigation.
Good. All these things need to happen.
Yeah. Colorado Republicans, however, blamed Padilla.
Well, of course.
Yeah. Freshman
can't possibly be the fault of trigger-happy federal agents or Kristi Noem, who shoots dogs when they get too mouthy.
Right. Freshman Representative Jeff Crank told CPR News it was, quote, another example of the left intentionally impeding law enforcement, unquote.
Fuck this guy, by the way.
The video speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Jeff Hurd, pulled a Corey Gardner, the bread sandwich, said he hadn't seen the video and couldn't comment. Like, for God's sake, you've seen the video. Nobody talked about anything else in Congress that day, I'm sure. Gabe Evans,
I can say I was pretty close to it.
Gabe Evans, of course, could not be located for comment. And we'll tell you more in a moment about what Lauren Boebert said.
Gabe Evans sitting there with, with a picture of Alex Padilla going, gangster grandma.
I'm confused.
Which one is it?
So on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is we are fully fascist, where are we now?
Like a hot 9.6.
Wow, you think we're up there, huh? Yeah.
They're arresting members of the opposition party. They tried to make it illegal for the opposition party to raise money. They've criminalized speech. Yeah, feels like we're pretty far down the list, man.
I was going to say 8 just because I don't want it to be higher, but you might be right, man. The part that really frightened me, actually, were the images of the plainclothes people manhandling Padilla.
That's
who are
true.
They?
Well, who are the plainclothes people who are, cosplaying as ICE agents running around the country right now? There have been no fewer than 4 crimes tied to people like presenting themselves as ICE agents and then like robbing a convenience store or kidnapping somebody. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. I want to point out one more quote from the CPR article that I think is very good, and I want to thank Caitlin Kim or Megan Verlee and Caitlin Kim for making sure that this was present in the article. It says, Rep. Lauren Boebert used retweets to make her views clear. She surfaced a 2-year-old post from Padilla in which he wrote, "No one is above the law. Sheriff, you agree. It is unclear what law Boebert believes Padilla broke."
We're going to do that again in a minute. But
sorry.
That's all right. Remember, private security groups have been removing protesters from Republican events for months. We played a clip earlier this year of a woman in Idaho getting literally dragged out of a town hall meeting by men with no identifying information on their clothing. That part really creeped me out. Like, it's
well,
not
what
like
they're saying
have...
and what Kristi Noem was saying when they were dragging Alex Padilla out of this room, the excuse they're using is that, oh, these officers are being doxxed, which is why they can't put identifying markers on. They can't wear their badge numbers and they have to hide their faces. There's no fucking evidence of that at all, by the way, is there?
No.
If they had any evidence, don't you think they would never stop talking about it?
Right. I agree. So let's talk a little bit more about Lauren Boebert.
Unfortunately, listeners, she is still 1/8 of our congressional delegation, and we're very sorry.
So how did Boebert respond to the removal of Senator Alex Padilla from that press conference?
I want to give Caitlin Kim and Megan Verlee from Colorado Public Radio props, because in that same article we were just referencing, they wrote, Rep. Lauren Boebert used retweets to make her views clear. She surfaced a 2-year-old post from Padilla in which he wrote, "No one is above the law. Sheriff, you agree. It is unclear what law Boebert believes Padilla broke." The law of asking questions to cabinet members. Now illegal in Trump's America.
I forgot about that law. Here's Kyle Clark of 9 News with a little more on that reaction.
Lauren Boebert of Colorado suggested that Senator Padilla committed a crime at that press conference where he attempted to question Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Boebert's office specifically referred us to 2 federal crimes that involve impeding federal officers, which could carry prison terms up to 10 years. Boebert does have expertise on this issue, having been arrested herself in 2015 for allegedly impeding officers trying to make arrests in Colorado. And Boebert is an outspoken advocate for protecting law enforcement officers, with the exception of those attacked by J6 rioters at the Capitol, whose pardon she supported.
Yeah.
Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert.
Kind of perfect, huh?
Yeah.
Thanks to friend of the show, Kyle Clark, for just pointing out the irony of the situation.
Right. Meanwhile, Boebert is having trouble justifying the Trump administration's immigration raids, which led to Trump calling up the National Guard and even the Marines in Los Angeles. Here's Boebert from a recent congressional hearing and an exchange with Illinois Governor J.D. Pritzker,
who, by the fucking way, has done the best job out of any Democratic politician, congressperson, senator, governor, dog catcher, anywhere in the country of modeling the behavior and how you stand up to this. They ask him to come down to Congress and testify. He shows up and he turns it on these freaks over and over and over again. And it's quite a sight to behold. Check this out.
Thank you. Governor Pritzker.
I find it hard to believe that you're lecturing us about peaceful protest. Look at what happened January 6th here at the Capitol.
No, what we're seeing in LA is an insurrection. You want to talk about an insurrection? This is an absolute insurrection.
You don't understand what insurrection is.
I asked you a yes or no question. And I'm showing
Congress.
I started this off.
You were here. They were attacking you, by the way.
I would expect the same.
I'm answering your question. It is outrageous. You are asking.
Is it peaceful to
just? You're the one condoning
to destroy
of people who attack
private and government property
right here at our Capitol.
Governor Hochul.
Got him. Whew. Just got her ass completely.
Boebert, can I guess, take some solace in the fact that she didn't get blasted by Pritzker like Republican Congresswoman Mary Miller of Illinois. Listen to this.
Every one of these interactions just has the vibe of like you picked a fight with someone you thought you could beat and then they walloped your ass.
Yeah.
Check this one out.
Your policy of tying the hands of Illinois law enforcement, yes or no, sir?
You know, Congresswoman Miller, I am
Yes or
not
no,
going
sir?
to be lectured to by somebody who
I'm
extols
reclaiming
the
my
virtue
time.
of
I'm
Adolf
reclaiming my
Hitler.
time, Chairman.
Of somebody who allowed the
2024
pardoning
after
of January
I'm
6th.
reclaiming my time. Do you
I'm reclaiming my time is Congress speak for, oh shit, that didn't go as planned.
Let me try again. And finally, Boebert is really excited that Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. fired everyone, including a Colorado doctor, from the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices that the CDC normally consults in making decisions about vaccines to recommend to the public. Boebert was so excited about this that she fired off a tweet that I still don't understand.
The tweet from Secretary Kennedy says, yesterday I retired 17 members of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or ACIP, the CDC external panel that wields the grave responsibility of adding new vaccines to the recommended childhood schedule. Over the coming days, I'll use this platform to announce blah, 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 and Boebert retweets and says, I voted for this, saying that she voted to fire 17 public health experts from the panel that recommends childhood vaccines. Great
But
job.
she didn't vote for that.
I guess. Well, I mean, I think what she's saying is she voted for Trump, who put him in office, who did this. That's my assumption.
I guess, right. Like,
I see what you're saying now. Yeah, there was no congressional vote for this.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe she thinks she voted for RFK. It's possible.
It's possible. Let's say no Trump time this week, but if you are able and feel safe enough and willing to go out there on Saturday to the No Kings protests, that would be a good use of your time. There are everywhere. No matter where you are in Colorado, where you are across the country, you can find one of these things to get involved with. Just Google No Kings protest wherever you are, and you will be able to find one. Please stay smart. Please stay safe. Please stay peaceful, but please show up if you can.
All right, let's do a couple of quick hits, and then we'll get out of here for the week. Here's more evidence that Medicaid cuts would be very, very bad. The Colorado Sun took a deeper dive into those proposed cuts by congressional Republicans, and it's even worse than we thought.
Yeah, it says that costs will spike. 100,000 Coloradans will lose health coverage if Trump's spending bill passes. The Colorado Division of Insurance says 110,000 people could drop off coverage as subsidies decrease and programs meant to hold down prices falter. We've talked about this every week since the big bullshit bill passed, that this is going to increase costs, that this is going to kick people off insurance, this is going to especially and disproportionately hurt rural hospitals who rely on these subsidies and Medicaid to stay afloat and make the math work for themselves. And here we are with independent agencies saying the exact same thing. They could have just asked us. We've been on this for a couple weeks.
Right. But I'm glad to see people are starting to figure out that it's not just the people on Medicaid who would lose Medicaid that are going to be impacted. You don't have to have Medicaid to be impacted by this. Your costs, your insurance prices will go up.
At this point, I'm just kind of like the only answer to any of this is universal health care. Like, this system is so dumb and so bad and so broken. Like, it's just obvious where we have to go now. I thought it was funny because all that polling that came out when we talked about with Jake on the national side and in Colorado showed like huge support for Medicaid. So it's like, all right, let's get rid of Medicare for all. Let's just do Medicaid for all. What do you think?
Yeah, right. Whatever you want to call it for all. I like that.
Yeah, for real. Healthcare for all would be good.
All right, here's our FAFO, our fuck around and find out of the week. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul is very sad about being uninvited from the White House picnic.
It's kind of a great time of the year in the summer. My family comes up. My son and daughter-in-law and grandson are coming up because we were going to the White House picnic, but I've just been told that I've been uninvited from the picnic. I think I'm the first senator in the history of the United States to be uninvited to the White House picnic. The White House is owned by the taxpayers. We all are members of it. Every Democrat will be invited. Every Republican will be invited, but I will be the only one disallowed to come on the grounds of the White House. I just find this incredibly petty. I mean, I have been, I think, nothing but polite to the president. I have been a intellectual opponent, a public policy opponent, and he's chosen now to uninvite me from the picnic and to say my grandson can't come to the picnic. I just the level of immaturity is beyond words.
Remember, this is what will get a Republican U.S. senator's attention, not deploying the military in American cities, not throwing U.S. senators to the ground, not the wide variety of civil rights and public health violations that have occurred since the day this fucking lunatic was sworn back in. It's the disinvitation from the picnic that really grinds Rand Paul's gears.
Yeah, not the impeachments, not the insurrection, not the criminal convictions. I also love when
so
Republicans.
Shit.
they do this a lot, and you heard Paul do it, say, the White House is funded by taxpayers. It doesn't mean people can just go in there.
No, it's it's a high-level security event, having been myself, but they do have killer ice cream trucks, or at least they did when Joe Biden was president. I'm sure those two things are actually not unrelated now that we're talking about it.
That's right. Let's talk a little bit about the MyPillow trial. Mike Lindell's defamation trial for his claims against Denver-based Dominion Voting Services not going well for him. Kyle Clark of 9 News explains how a key witness, Lindell himself, doomed his chances.
The team suing Lindell called him as their own witness, and when they got him on the witness stand, they just let him talk and talk and talk.
We have all the election fraud with these Dominion machines. We have 100% proof.
The MyPillow guy's talk has led the world's most powerful man to believe he's a victim of election rigging.
This election was rigged, and the Supreme Court and other courts didn't want to do anything about it.
Lindell has made clear he too sees himself as a victim, crying on the stand today as he talked about how his company collapsed after he started his election rigging claims. His attorneys say it doesn't matter if all that was the truth. It's just good enough that Mike Lindell believed that Denver-based voting systems and a former executive there flipped the 2020 election. I wasn't reckless, Lindell testified. I've probably done more due diligence than anyone in human history. One, the election security or cyber experts consulted by Lindell is coming to testify at this trial that Lindell has evidence to back up his claims. In fact, testimony has shown that some of Lindell's own experts and ideological allies warned him that his so-called evidence was nonsense. He was asked on the stand whether his accusations are dangerous if he's wrong. But I'm not wrong, Lindell said. In fact, Lindell testified that when he was warned that his so-called experts and evidence were shoddy, he only became more convinced, thinking the pushback was part of a grand cover-up. Yes. Opposing attorneys let Lindell rant at length from the witness stand, including the moment when he once again accused a former Dominion exec of a high crime. He did it right there in the courtroom. "You're covering up the greatest crime this world has ever seen," Lindell hollered at his opponents. Then, turning to the jury and saying, as he has for years, "Our politicians are selected for us." The opposing attorneys asked Lindell, practically begged him today, to offer up any other evidence he had that Dominion's Eric Coomer had participated in the greatest crime in history. Lindell said the proof was that Coomer had sued him for defamation, a circular logic that might just qualify as among the greatest in history.
Remember, the only real defense against a defamation accusation is to prove that you were saying the truth.
Right.
That's not working. We'll let you know how this trial turns out, but I think you could probably guess.
Just keep tuning in to Next with Kyle Clark for coverage of this. He's doing the best job in the state, and it's not particularly close. Yeah.
Dave Williams has a job.
Wait, which one? There's 3 of them, remember?
Well, the one that was the former state Republican Party chairman.
Okay, because David O. Williams still has a job up in the Vail papers. Dave Williams, the former Senate candidate, does not have a job because he lost.
Right.
So third Dave Williams, former Colorado Republican Party chair, is who we are discussing on this Dave Williams-centric segment.
Remember, he didn't run for re-election as state party chair because he was waiting for an appointment from the Trump administration. He finally got it.
I fucking told you it would happen. It was only a matter of where they could slot his loyalist ass in somewhere.
He is the new senior advisor to the International Trade Administration at the Commerce Department. Whatever the hell that means.
Incredible stuff. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because he's going to get paid by the taxpayers to lick Donald Trump's boot, and that's all he wants anyway.
The funny part about this, though, among others parts, is that Williams has long worked for his father-in-law's business, which essentially is just importing cheap crap from China.
Hey, maybe Dave Williams will save us from the price spikes and tariffs.
Yeah, maybe.
Seem likely?
All right, our gibberish of the week, we've got 2 for you. First, here's House Speaker Mike Johnson getting heckled by Democrats when he's trying to bash Senator Alex Padilla after he was removed from that Christie Nome press conference.
I think the senator's actions, my view is it was wildly inappropriate. You don't charge a sitting cabinet secretary and everybody can draw their own conclusions. You can see it's a heated debate. I'm not going to respond to that. Hold on, just a second. I think the American people can draw their own conclusions. They saw a senator acting like wildly inappropriate. I'll leave it at that. So.
Fucking handmaiden of fascism, this weak loser. This guy is one of the worst. And there was this politician, I think his name is Pierre Poilievre in Canada, who was leading the sort of right wing party that ended up getting trounced in the elections. He not only lost the race to become prime minister because they didn't take the majority in the government, he lost his own seat. Something this poetic needs to happen to Mike
that would
Johnson.
be beautiful.
Yeah. It's like a gerrymandered as fuck, like very, very, very Republican district. But like he's got to lose an election.
That would be
over
nice.
all this.
And our bonus gibberish. This was too good to leave out. Here's Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia grilling, sort of, New York Governor Kathy Hochul during a recent committee hearing.
This is like one of the like when you're making like Kathy Hochul look like a leader of the revolution, like you have definitely stepped in it.
Governor Hochul, you stated that you're a proud registered Democrat.
Yes, I did. Is that illegal now too in your country?
Governor Hochul, this is not a laughing matter.
No shit. Yeah. I want to show you a little bit of listener feedback we got. We love hearing from our fans and listeners. So I wanted to share this bit of feedback we got via text message. I want to share this little bit of feedback we got from listeners. This came via text message, which you can text us. If you go to your podcast listener, there's a little link up top, click the button on your phone, and you'll be able to send the show a text message. This one comes from Denver. Hi. I'm an avid listener in Douglas County. Really appreciate how you do interviews, and I'm learning from you and doing my own very local podcast about Douglas County politics. Red County, Blue State. We like the title. We have some banana stuff happening down here as usual. I was listening to the most recent episode, and I'm eager to see how this CD8 race shakes out. Thanks for your easygoing style and your takes on what's going on in Colorado and nationally, from Emily Suyat. Thanks, Emily. Yeah. We really appreciate getting the feedback. We're glad you enjoy the show, and we're glad that we've inspired you to consider starting your own podcast. If you get that thing up and running, give us a shout. We'll come on. We love podcasts.
Yeah.
All right. The Get More Smarter podcast is a production of ColoradoPulse.com and the Bighorn Company. Your hosts are me, Ian Silveri, and America's dad,
Jason Bain,
who somehow managed to figure out how to engineer and produce this thing. Megan makes the videos. Thank you so much, Megan. I handle some of the internet crap. Jason handles some of the internet crap. Megan handles some of the internet crap. And we are just so happy to be involved in this stuff. The phenomenal Breakmaster Cylinder made the theme song. Get your shots while you still can. Protect your trans kids, your immigrant kids, your autistic kids, and any other kids in your life, really. Send us a message, send us a text, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, a comment on Spotify, or a reply to a post on Blue Sky. We'll read it on the air. Don't you want to be famous? Subscribe to our YouTube channel and battle the trolls in the comments. Subscribe to the audio version on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Rate the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you got more smarter, because it actually helps us a lot. Find us at getmoresmarter.com, where you can sign up for bonus content in our Substack. And please send all angry and non-angry rants to angryrants at getmoresmarter.com. Other stuff to Ian at getmoresmarter.com, and other stuff to Jason at getmoresmarter.com. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Jake Williams, our guest this week, and we'll see you next time.
In somewhere along the Front Range.
Well, this is absolutely terrible news, because my kid is 5 and has learned about earthquakes and became very afraid of them recently. And I was like, no, you have to worry, buddy. Colorado, no earthquakes. So now I've lied to my child. That's not great news.
Well, you told him that before you learned this.
Now I will lie by omission to my child.
Right. Just don't talk about it anymore.
I don't intend to.
I know. My daughter's the same way, and she's come to really value living in Colorado because we don't have hurricanes, we don't have tsunamis, and we do have tornadoes, but they're typically to the east of us. And he's like, this is kind of like the perfect place. So I'm gonna keep quiet about the earthquake this morning.